Oh, she's right there.
Okay, it's just after 12 o'clock. Oh. Okay, it's just after 12 o'clock, so I'll call the meeting to order. Third meeting of Community and Protective Services Committee. And I'll start by saying that the City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for council, standing or advisory committee meetings and information upon request. To make a request for any city service, please contact accessibility@london.ca or 519-661-2489, extension 2425. And now I will look to the committee to see if there are any disclosures of conflict. I see none. So to start, I just wanted to let committee know that item number 2.5 under consent will involve a little bit of a presentation from staff. So I'm going to slightly change the order of business here and put 2.5 at the end of the scheduled items. So we'll go through all of consent, then we'll go through scheduled items 3.1 and 3.2, and then we'll deal with 2.5. So with that, are there any other consent items besides 2.5 that the committee would like to pull? Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to pull 2.6 and 2.7. I think that there's a discussion to be had on both of those, so I'd like to have that separate.
Thank you. Anybody else? No. So with that, I'll need a motion to move consent items 2.1 to 2.4 and 2.8. Do I have that? Councillor Pelosa, seconded by Councillor Hillier. Any comments on any of those items? No. Okay, we can vote. So I'm sorry, sir, this is not a public participation meeting for that item.
May I speak to the news report then after the meeting then?
You are free to speak to anybody from the media after the meeting, yes.
12 years ago, I got escorted out by the...
Okay, so if you'll calm down a little bit and stay in order and let us conduct the meeting, then everything will be fine. So we're going to vote on those consent items, committee.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Okay, moving right along, we will go to item number 2.6, and Councillor Lewis, you pulled that one.
Thank you, Chair, and through you to staff, I appreciate the work that's being done on our bylaw monitoring and modernization. I know it's a tough job, but I do have a couple of questions that I would like to ask in follow-up to this report to us. And the first is, if staff could indicate, because it was mentioned in there, you know, we've delegated legislative authority so that administrative processes can clear up some of this for us. So through you to Mr. Katolik, with the delegation of that legislative authority, at what point would staff come back to us and say, we need your direction on this? Or is it just purely up to members of committee, members of council to come back to you and say, we're not satisfied with the way the administration's handling this, so we'd like to intervene? Is there a guideline for that for you?
Through the chair, the intent of the streamlining of authority is to look at efficiency and decision-making, and to allow council to look at some of the bigger picture issues from a strategic matter, and allow city administration to deal with some of the operational items that we deal with on a daily basis with bylaw enforcement and administration. We do have a standard operating procedure that we use when we amend administrative bylaws, and that is to put the draft bylaw on the internet and allow for 2 weeks feedback from the public and the industry that we're dealing with, and then we make a decision. Certainly, if there are issues that become political in nature or we feel that really should be a decision, more strategic decision on behalf of council, we would come back. And if we feel that we're making decisions from an administrative enforcement operational matter that are the same decisions all the time, we would likely come back and say the bylaw actually needs to be amended to look at this regulation because it certainly doesn't make sense at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Katolik. And I guess the second part to that then, seeing that property standards and the fence bylaws are the ones that are sort of slated for review this year. A question through you, Chair, to Mr. Katolik again. With property standards, I know that this is a big one, but I want to get a sense of how big, because I certainly get some property standards complaints from constituents. Approximately how many property standards complaints would we get in a year? And from those, what percentage of them actually result in an order to, repair, modify, clean up? What percentage would result in an order being issued?
Through the chair, last year the numbers are we received 538 property standard complaints, which led to 513 violations. And of those, 481 resulted in orders that were registered on title. Since we've had a heightened property standards issue with residential licensing, we are now proactively attending residential properties and doing property standard inspections. It certainly has increased the number of appeals to the Property Standards Committee, which sits as the Minor Variance Committee. So for example, in 2016, we had 5 property standard appeals to that committee. Last year we had 78. Now, when we're reviewing our bylaw, one of the most common issues that are taken to that committee is ceiling height in basement apartments. We have a tolerance administratively that we allow for a half-inch tolerance for the ceiling height, but a number of older buildings are beyond that. So it's the committee making those decisions. So in the proposed property standards bylaw that we'll bring forward at a future public meeting, we're certainly going to be looking at ceiling height in basements for rental properties.
Thank you very much, and if the chair will indulge me, just one more question, I promise. And this one might be one that Mr. Katolik may not want to answer. He might feel that this is more of a political question or a question perhaps for the strategic plan and the budget coming up, but in terms of staffing levels, do you have enough bylaw enforcement officers to keep up with the demand that your department has right now?
I'll answer that question. Currently we do. However, if we go into the model that we had this summer with the pilot project with informed response and dealing with people living rough downtown in or urban encampments, then we would be short-staffed if we did that program 24/7 throughout the year.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from committee on item 2.6? No, with that, I'll need a mover, Councillor Lewis, and seconded by Councillor Sully. And then we can vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Moving right along to item 2.7, making nasal naloxone kits available for public use in some City of London facilities. And Councillor Lewis, you pulled that one as well.
I did, and thank you, Chair. I want to be clear, and so I'll ask this through you to our staff. What we're looking at right here is a proposed implementation plan. I don't see direction to actually proceed with implementing this, and I see some real concerns highlighted in this. The city staff will not be required as part of their job to administer naloxone. There has been no reported incidents of opioid overdoses at the City of London facilities. The corporation making medication available for use by the public could be subject to civil lawsuits. So I have some some pretty serious concerns about some of the information that's in here in terms of what it exposes us to in terms of being a corporation, as well as where the need truly is in the community, or whether we're just making a symbolic gesture with this direction. So I wonder if staff could provide a little more clarity in the purpose of, I mean, I see the conclusion in front of us, but I don't see an actual recommendation to implement. So where are we with that?
Through the chair, under our recommendation, you see the steps that we would be proposing to implement. So that in fact is the implementation plan. So should council accept the recommendation, then we would move forward to undertake those identified steps in terms of placing the kits, getting the signage in place, and doing all the other necessary things, including working with the health unit around at least one public education session. So that's the intention. We were also responding to a council direction to return with a proposed implementation plan. So that is what we have attempted to put in front of you.
Councillor Sully, and then the mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just had a question to staff. I know it's clearly articulated in the report where we won't be getting funding from the medical health unit. But I wanted to just double check, is there any other opportunities for us for cost recovery or in the future from whether the province or the feds to help with these costs, recognizing that firefighters and police officers across Ontario do get them received for free? I'm just wondering if there's any programs that we know of, maybe down the road, that may be coming to help with some of the costs associated, or if at minimum, if staff can maybe perhaps reach out to their counterparts in the province to see if that's something that can be done.
Through the chair, we're not aware of a program that we could recover costs at this time. However, we're more than prepared to undertake that. I would just note that that in terms of the cost of this pilot, the larger component of the cost is actually training our staff, not in the purchase of the kits.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to staff. A couple of things. First, a comment. We know that naloxone administration saves lives. I think we've seen that. I have a son-in-law who's a firefighter and appreciate the impact that it has. So a couple of questions on this. I noted that to Ms. Livingston, that in the recommendation section D, we talk about education and that there would be at least one public education session. So I have a couple of questions, but my first question is if that would be sufficient. I know you made reference to training staff, but is one public education session sufficient for a one-year trial period?
Through the chair, I think that's why it says at least one, where these are sessions that the health unit would be holding. This model is based on the model in Kingston, where the town hall meetings were part of the introduction of this program. So I think we'd work closely with the health unit to determine the number of town halls that need to be in place. If more than one needs to occur, then I'm certain that will happen. I'm quite certain Dr. Mackey would be on side to do that.
Well, as a follow-up to that, my sense is it likely would be. I think there's a certain concern people would have, mostly out of thoughtful ignorance, that we just don't know how to utilize this equipment. It's no different than defibrillators. You know, we've made a real effort, I think, in putting defibrillators into arenas and different public facilities. But I dare say, if you went around everyone in this gallery and everyone around the table and said, A, have you ever used it? Or would you actually know what to do, notwithstanding the fact that we can all read and know the steps, but with the added tension of someone who's in distress, be it because of heart, be it because of drug, whatever it might be, my sense is clearly that more than one, and I would be encouraging the health unit to consider more than one as we go through, particularly as it is a trial, and while we know that the initial cost is, say, $10,000 for this trial, and that's just the hard costs, it would strike me that what you would want to consider would be a number of education opportunities for people, perhaps tying it into other things that we do for the citizens of London. My second question then relates to inputs. Have we, since those who use this in terms of naloxone on any kind of a regular basis, EMS, firefighters, police, What have been their inputs with respect to us providing these publicly? Have you sought out their views, and what's the feedback you're receiving from them, please?
Through the chair, in our research around moving forward with this proposed program, we spoke extensively to the health unit. We also consulted with Dr. Michael Llewell, who's the medical director for the Middlesex London Paramedic Service, and also with the Civic Administration in Kingston, who are implementing this program. So those are the folks that we talked to in the development. I just want to look to see if they're, yep. Chief. As well as Armstrong. What's his last name? What's the chief's last name? So in addition, we spoke to Neil Roberts. Sorry, I had a total brain gap there. Apologies. We also spoke with our own folks locally.
Or he or she who will be named later. My final question, and thank you for that, through you, Chair, again to staff. A reference made to maintenance, and I think that's the important thing. Perhaps this is to Mr. Stafford, but what will be, and perhaps this is the defibrillator question too, what is the monitoring process that is utilized for the purpose of ensuring that, let's say that someone has taken a unit and it might be vandalism, it might be well-intended, whatever it might be. What is your approach to maintenance to ensure that these naloxone kits are current and able to be used readily?
Yeah, through the chair, we have a building checklist basically for several items, everything from cleaning items to fire extinguishers to the AEDs that we currently have in the facilities. And naloxone will be part of that daily checklist to make sure that what are the expiry dates, make sure it's there, make sure it's in working order, and that'll be part of the facilities checklist that we currently have for, like I say, several items.
Councillor Pelosa.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through the chair, a couple of questions. Can you tell me what the expiration date of the kits are, how long the medication there does work for?
My support staff over there tell me it's 18 months.
Okay, thank you, and realizing that it's a pilot project and we've identified 29 sites, wondering if there was any consideration to doing a narrower pilot project, or we just decided to cast the net wide to every facility by the City of London that's open year-round.
Through the chair, in the spirit of the program that these incidents can occur anywhere in our city, we felt it would be best to go with every publicly accessible facility that we had that was available year-round, so that people would know consistently that that the naloxone kits were available. So that was the intention, to try and have as broad coverage as we could as possible.
Thank you. Through the chair, a follow-up question. I'm looking for the rate of survival or recovery versus with a site having a kit versus the first responders having one, and my understanding that their response time is 4.5-ish minutes.
I don't know the answer to that question.
Through the chair, thank you for indulging me. Also a question in regards to under financial impacts, there's a line stating that this might trigger an increase in some staff's wages at these facilities. Looking for a brief description of what that pertains to.
Through the chair, jobs are rated through a job rating process, and there's a possibility whenever there's a change to their job responsibilities, or perhaps a change in what may occur in the facility that they work in or may occur in their daily work life. There's an opportunity for them to say this may impact what the responsibilities are, so there's a chance that that could be reviewed and there could be impact toward that.
Sorry, and through the chair, one final question, as it was a good report. Is there any concerns brought forward to you from the community so far, or from Dr. Chris Mackey, in regards to having sharps disposals on sites, a naloxone kit, and a public perception of this is now a safe consumption site?
Through the chair, we've worked extensively with Dr. Mackey and his staff, and he is supportive of this plan. We have not heard those concerns from him.
Okay, I don't know if I've got a reputation for being a hard-nosed chair, but you don't have to apologize when you have a number of questions. Generally, you've got 5 minutes at a time, and it's fine. Councillor Squire.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for recognizing me. I don't want to enter the debate. I have that opportunity at council. I just wanted to provide the background on this particular project. Every year, it actually originated in Ward 6, and I'm very proud of how this originated. Every year, the students at the Schulich School of Medicine prepare a proposal for City Council of something that they're passionate about or something they feel strongly about. And they come to Council with these ideas, they bring them to me, we work with staff, and we try to bring something reasonable forward. And this is indeed one of those projects. This is the second project they brought forward. The first didn't succeed, and this is their second project. And so I'm really proud to work with them. I'm really proud that they feel so strongly about the London community, and I'm really proud to say that this year they're going to be bringing forward a project on child poverty. So I think it's important to understand that concept. They obviously it's reading week this week at Western, and so unfortunately they're not here in force today, but I hope I'm speaking for them and for their passion. But certainly I'll try to have them here next week for the debate. But I think it's just important to understand that the involvement of the university community and the students in a project is important to me, and I hope it's important to council. The other thing is, one of the things that they made very clear was this was a start. You know, getting the City of London to jump on and say, we're prepared to look at this is really important to them. And certainly, you know, maybe in the private sector, people will follow our example and start doing this. And, you know, in my line of business, we lose people all the time because of drugs through my work in mental health and criminal law. And recently, a colleague of mine said that he won a trial for a client, and the client was so happy, he went out to celebrate that evening. And of course, how did he celebrate? By using inappropriate drugs, and he was dead the next day. So saving one life is important. And I know that there's obstacles to these sort of things, but I'm hoping we may see our way to move forward with this.
Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank Councillor Pelosa because she asked a couple of the questions that I wanted to ask as well with regard to fire, EMS, police having these kits and their response time and the expiry date. Of course, we do, there's a bit of a conundrum here in the report that we've identified an increase in wages potentially for staff, but we've also highlighted that it will not be city staff's responsibility to administer these as their job duties. So I find a bit of a contradiction there. I wonder if staff wants to address that before I offer any other comments.
Through the chair, it's a potential. We have to put that in as a potential risk financially. Even though it's not the duty of the staff to perform the act, the results of naloxone and actions that could take place either before, prior, during, still may put the staff that are in charge of the facility or in charge of the building with some additional responsibilities. So we anticipate that may come forward. We don't know the results of the evaluation when that comes forward, but we have to anticipate that that's a possibility.
Thank you. So I'm just going to offer some comments to colleagues then. First of all, there's no doubt that naloxone kits save lives when they're used properly and when they're available. It's great that our emergency services on all three fronts have them available and that our response time is as good as it is. 4.5 minutes is faster than I think I could run from the arena parking lot into an arena, grab a naloxone kit, run back out to administer to somebody who was overdosing in the parking lot. To the mayor's comment about the AED, I respect where he's coming from. I respectfully disagree. They're not quite the same. Many AEDs actually talk you through the process with voice instructions as you utilize them, and you're not administering medication. I'm very concerned that we're asking members of the public, city staff, potentially, to administer medication in an emergency situation that they may misdiagnose. It could be a seizure, it could be a stroke or a heart attack, and that could be a real problem. It's highlighted in the report that this opens us up to some real potential civil liabilities. So I think at this, and the other piece is that once we start a pilot project, we rarely take it away. We move forward with it. These are going to expire every 18 months. We are not eligible for the free kits There are many other options in terms of emergency services response times, folks who are much better qualified to handle these situations than members of the public. So I appreciate the work that staff has put into this. I'm concerned about us moving forward with this. So I think I would be prepared to move to receive and take no further action on this at this time. Notwithstanding, I appreciate Councillor Squire's comments about the passion. I think we all realize that there's a crisis in the community, but having heard that we've had no incidents of this at these facilities, I'm concerned that we're putting symbolism over steps that could make a real impact. And so that's what I'm going to encourage my colleagues to support, is to receive and take no action.
Mayor Holder.
Thank you. This was intended to be a debate. In terms of Councillor and I having different views, I think the issue was that when anyone is in distress, whether it be heart, seizure, drug overdose, that puts the stress on the giver of the service regardless. So whether one is talked through an AED process or whether one can read directions and follow the rules, I still think it does put a considerable amount of stress on the individual providing the service. My question, though, to you, through you, Chair to staff, is this, and I meant to ask it before, and that is as it relates to providing aid and support to individuals who have overdosed. I wonder, I know Dr. Mackey, I don't believe, is here to respond to this, but the safe consumption site, the temporary site that's in place now, most of the, I'm told, most of the recovery is done through oxygen as opposed to naloxone in terms of treatment. And that usually is sufficient. Naloxone doesn't, it's not surprising that most would then be transported by ambulance for service care. But I note that this is naloxone and not oxygen, and I'm just wondering if you can help me understand. Perhaps this is along the line of Councillor Lewis in terms of risk management and when is too much in terms of the right service to provide. I'm no expert in this, but since most of the treatments are done, the recovery of the individual is done through oxygen treatment, how do we make that distinction when someone is in distress as a result of a drug overdose, please?
Through the chair, this is why the importance of calling 911. So the naloxone administration is not apart from undertaking the necessary step of calling 911 and getting medical assistance there in a timely way. So those things would go together. My understanding through the chair is that there are many organizations throughout the city that have naloxone kits available. Their staff are trained and they're used, and they're not all set up the way the safe consumption site is set up. So like those places, the first aid steps of calling 911 along with any administration of the naloxone would go hand in hand.
Any other comments or questions? So if the committee doesn't mind, I have a few questions that I'd like to ask from the chair. I just wanted to confirm, Ms. Livingston, you said that many other organizations have them. Do all pharmacies in the city carry naloxone as well? Do you know? And if so, how difficult is it to obtain?
Apparently the answer is not all, but it's very easy to obtain.
And I know that staff looked at the Kingston model. And in the report it says that there have been no incidents of overdose that we know of at our community centers or arenas. What about in Kingston? Have they had many incidents? Do these naloxone kits get used in Kingston?
So at the time of writing the report, there were 0 incidents in Kingston, in the facilities where these kits are.
Okay. And how long has the program been in place in Kingston? Do you know?
I believe it's just over 2 years.
Oh, that's interesting. And how often are our AEDs used, roughly? .
just get Lynn to come up here 3 times in the last year, Chair.
Thank you, 3 times in the last year. Okay. Was there an impact as far as the job classification thing with, when we installed the AEDs?
No, there was no impact at that time, and most of the employees have been trained in that first aid process prior as well.
And so we speak about in the report liability through, possible liability through administering this substance. What about refusal? So if it says in the report that we will not make it mandatory that staff administer this substance, could there be liability if somebody's experiencing an overdose and nobody in the facility will administer the naloxone?
Through the chair, we do have legal staff here, so if they wish to also assist with this question, but I just want to be very clear that this is a public program. The purpose of providing naloxone is for public use. That's the intent. The training of staff is to be able to support that to happen. So it's a different intent than a city-delivered program.
Through the chair, in response to your question, I do just want to be cautious because if you're seeking privileged and confidential legal advice, I would be recommending that that be heard in camera. We were comfortable just putting generally the advice with respect to the fact that there is potential liability. I think that's a fact that any person, the general public, would know, as well as bringing to your attention the piece about the McEachern legislation that applies to the AEDs but would not apply in this case. So Lynn Marshall of our offices was the individual who actually gave most of the advice about the potential negligence type claims. And if you would like further advice with respect to that prior to the council meeting at that, I would be happy to come back with that advice. But I do recommend that that be heard in camera, given the privileged nature of what it would constitute.
Thank you. Mayor Holder.
Thank you, Chair. Through to staff. I thought there was something in effect of the Good Samaritan law, so that if someone acts with good intent to someone who is in distress, that absolves them from legal liability. And I don't see Mr. Card here, but I do wonder if there's, I'm sure there's been consideration given to that, so that if one does intend to do such things and does it well intended with under reasonable circumstances, that does limit their exposure. Can someone from staff comment on that if they're able?
Through the chair, to the best of my knowledge, the Good Samaritan Act would be applicable in these circumstances. I believe Ms. Marshall often also referenced in the report section, I think it's 240 of the Municipal Act, that speaks to policy decisions of council, which could have some application as well with respect to potential liability in this case.
So I'm just going to look to committee to see if there's any further comments. I have some comments that I would make, but I don't want to speak until everybody has had a chance to say everything that's on their mind. Crickets. Oh, Councillor Hillier.
Yes, I'm very curious through staff. A moment ago you said we're providing them for the public use. What if the employee does not give proper instructions to that member of the public? Is the city on the hook?
Again, my recommendation would be that that's seeking privileged and confidential legal advice, and I would recommend that that be given in public, because otherwise you're waiving that legal privilege.
So if any member of committee wishes to go in camera, that's always your option. If you wish our legal counsel to have information available for the council discussion, that's also something I think we can talk about, but well, Councillor, that's completely up to you. If you want to make a motion, then you need to move it and someone would need to second it, and then we would have to vote on it. Okay, so the councillors decided not to move in camera. Any other comments, committee, or visiting council members? No? Good. So I just want to make a couple of comments. First of all, my concern was the opposite of the Good Samaritan rule. And my concern was if the substance exists in the facility and nobody chooses to use it, could there be a problem there? Not so much a problem with administering the substance, but in refusing to administer it or having it available and nobody uses it. I don't know if that would be a problem. I think we might be trying to fix a problem that doesn't really exist. I think our emergency response of 4.5 minutes, I didn't know that, so thank you to Councillor Lewis for finding that out. I think that's pretty impressive, and I agree that even if it's somebody out on the street, not in the community center, to get the kit and run back and administer it, you may be arriving at the same time as emergency response. I know that naloxone is generally benign if it's administered to somebody that isn't experiencing overdose. But I never did consider the idea of misdiagnosing. So administering naloxone and it isn't an overdose, and could a minute or two have been wasted in doing that when someone could have called 911. I understand that is the first thing to do by staff, but I just fear that there could be a risk that somebody may just take it upon themselves to go with the naloxone first and then decide to call 911. The fact that it's been going on for 2 years in Kingston and never been used, and that's who we're modeling our program on, that is concerning to me. It's throughout the areas of the city where there is known widespread public drug use, there are organizations and agencies that have the substance, they have the naloxone, they have the training, they know exactly what to expect. And the fact that all of our emergency responders have these kits, and most of the pharmacies in London have these kits, and it's quite easily available if you present yourself and say that you need this kit. And all of those sites as well, many of them not only have the training in naloxone, but also have additional emergency medical training, which I think is very important because it's about more than just delivering this naloxone. So those are my thoughts. Mayor Holder, go ahead.
Well, I sense, Chair, where you're going. I have to speak in favor of this motion. If we save one life, and we've said that whether it be the temporary consumption site or when we made efforts to put in the defibrillators, because moments matter. And I'm not sure if you see someone in distress that everyone's going to have a naloxone kit in their car, or the right people will, or that you can afford to go to a pharmacy and say, I need to borrow one, or get one, or have one. I think the idea of availability is important. I think that this will be well received by the broader community. And, you know, good that the community that we've looked at as another pilot project initially, I'm sure, hasn't had an issue in 2 years. And I hope they never have one, as I hope London doesn't. But if we save a life because we've got that at hand, or someone that has done something in the parking lot, and you can go right to the one of our facilities and just take it and use it. You know, I think we're an enlightened society, and I'd rather err on the side of saving lives, and I put it down in those terms because I think that's ultimately what it comes down to, which is why I'll be supporting going forward with this. Is there a motion on the floor to do that?
Councillor Lewis had made an indication that he wanted to move receiving the report and taking no action. I have let the discussion continue, so I have not seen if there is a seconder for that motion. And now I see that Councillor Pelosa is willing to second Councillor Lewis's motion. Councillor Sully, do you have any? Oh, go ahead, Mr. Mayor, you still have the floor.
Well, I want to make sure I understand the protocol of this, but I would like to, if it's appropriate, move the staff recommendation. but I'm not sure which in the line of precedence takes first offer. So I would not vote to receive, but I would vote to implement the staff recommendation.
So, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Lewis did indicate that he wanted to make that motion first. I did not look for a seconder at the time. I'm happy to look to Councillor Lewis if he wants to let your motion go on the floor first. I'm seeing where the committee is going on this, so Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and at the risk of having the mayor challenge the chair on you,
I've had it happen, it's pretty cool.
I would actually like to let my motion stand and deal with that first.
Councillor Sali.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I understand the motion will be on the floor to just receive and take no action. I will be voting against it. If the motion is defeated, I'll be happy to second the motion of the mayor. My rationale is we spend thousands of dollars every year, whether it's sprinklers, fire alarms, right in this building, that will maybe hopefully never ever get used. But the point is for that one instance, for that one time, to make an impact and to save lives. And that's my argument. I'm not a medical expert. We've heard from people who are the future in medicine here at Western, one of the greatest universities in the country. And they're moving forward with this direction. Councillor Squire and council previous to this had headed in this direction. Staff came back with this report because council wanted to go this way. And I think it's an opportune time for us to do what we can. I know when we look at other, epidemics or, whether you call it swine flu or those kind of episodes of things that happen, health communities react, cities react, whether it's enhanced hand sanitizer in places, face masks that happen, those all cost money, and those sometimes could be temporary. I'm hoping that this opiate crisis is temporary, and this is something that we don't need for 10 years, 20 years, but just for the interim, and I think I want to see where this goes. So that's why I'll be voting against the motion to just receive and take no action, because my hope is to take action.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments? So there is a motion on the floor to receive the staff report and take no action, moved by Councillor Lewis and seconded by Councillor Pelosa. If there is no further comment, we can vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-2.
Thank you, committee, and thank you, Councillor Squire. We'll move to...
I have to say that the medical students are now 0 for 2.
Okay. I'm looking forward to their next project, I really am.
Well, I'm sure you are.
So, item 3.1, and it is a public participation meeting. It is a sound bylaw and outdoor patio time exemption and housekeeping amendments. So first, I will look to Mr. Katolik to see if he'd like to introduce this item.
Yes, this is an amendment that would create an opportunity to extend the time to 1 a.m. from midnight for temporary noise permits for patios. There would be no change in the decibels for patios. That would stay at 70 decibels. And this amendment would only apply to the time period of March 14th to March 17th, so leading up to the Junos and Juno evening. Each application would be evaluated on its own merits, so it would be no change in the evaluation process that's currently done by Civic Administration.
So I'll look for a motion to open the public participation meeting, moved by Councillor Sali, seconded by Councillor Lewis, and we'll vote on that. We're not ready yet. We're still opening the public participation meeting.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
So before I go to the members of the public, I'll look to committee to see if you have any technical questions for Mr. Katolik. Seeing none, I will go to members of the public. Ms. Valastro, I believe you wanted to.
Somebody else, is there somebody else that'd like to go?
If there is. Can you go to the microphone, sir, please, and state your name? If you're comfortable giving your address, please do so. And you have 5 minutes to address the committee.
Start off, my name is Brian Gowing, qualified paramedic, top in the province of Air Ambulance.
Can you please speak into the microphone, sir?
Sorry, my name is Brian Gowing, top paramedic in the province, Air Ambulance and Land. Was a registered nurse, but they want to medicate me to become a nurse. I'm not going to be medicated. But anyway, we started off doing things decently in order, as the Bible says. We talked about the first thing, expiry date on these NOx. I don't see an expiry date, and even on the applicator, on the instructions, and even on the kit.
Excuse me, sir. We've finished with the naloxone item. We're now talking about these.
What about the fire? We were just talking about the fire alarms, right?
We've passed that, sir. We voted,
We
and
didn't
we're
get an
now
opportunity
talking.
to speak to the public about the naloxone, right?
We're talking about the sound bylaw. The naloxone initiative motion was not a public participation meeting. We've moved to a public.
Forgive me. I won't be tortured for the next year, will I? Because it's torture in this country if you try to speak out against the government. Sorry, this is not China where they shoot you right in the.
Okay, thank you, sir. Anybody to speak to the sound bylaw? Any members of the public present that would like to speak to the sound bylaw? I'll ask one more time. Anybody want to speak to the sound bylaw? Go ahead, Ms. Valastro.
Okay. So there's two items that are up here. Mr. Katolik talked about the Juno week, but there's the housekeeping items. And it's the housekeeping items that are of concern to people in my neighborhood, which is right off of Richmond Row. The housekeeping item is expanding amplified sound on patios year-round, which means that it hasn't been made clear to me, to all the staff that I spoke to yesterday, why you're expanding amplified sound on patios year-round. My understanding it's up to 12 months, but it can be 12 months. And in my neighborhood right now, I just went and checked. There's amplified sound coming out of the Run Club. It's quite low, but it bothers the people that live across the street. There's amplified sound that comes out of Meatheads. That happened on December. It was quite loud. And, there's nobody on the patio. It's just amplified for the sake of bringing attention to the establishment. And that's very concerning for us. And no one has been able to explain why you're linking an expansion of construction permits with the expansion of patio permits. And I'm asking the committee to please be clear and concise in what your intent is here with these housekeeping items. So if your intent is to allow amplified music on patios in the winter, then can you please say that in the bylaw so that people have an understanding of what the rules are? And if your intent is not to have amplified music on patios year-round, then can you please say that? So maybe the permit should just be the length of when the patio's in service. But please be clear, because I think a lot of people, everyone, is very uncomfortable with the fact that one person, the chief bylaw officer, has this discretionary power, and it has nothing to do with who the chief bylaw officer is. It could be Mary Tyler Moore, and people would still be uncomfortable. It's just that it's discretionary, and we got the permits from last year, and there were some serious discrepancies on how those permits were issued. And so we're just looking for some more understanding and clarity on what the intent is with these housekeeping items. The other housekeeping item is that there's a proposal to remove annual reporting, because the establishments that will be taking out permits will be listed on the website for public. But it's more than just reporting who has a permit. It's about what's in those permits that are of concern, and we want an avenue to have those conversations in a transparent manner. So if the annual reporting is removed, we don't understand where that dialogue might take place. And as far as the June, this is being pushed through in an afternoon meeting, a public afternoon meeting. Very difficult for people to have come down here today, including myself. This is all about pushing this through with the Junos, and my guess is that this linking the construction 12-month permit with the patios is all about March and making sure that patio owners don't have to pay twice for a permit so they can comply with the Junos. My last comment is with what Mr. Katolik did talk about. March 17th is St. Patrick's Day, and I guess that there's nobody on this committee that comes down to my neighborhood after midnight on St. Patrick's Day. It's a real enforcement issue by the police because the city isn't there. And if you are familiar with this, you'd understand that part of St. Patrick's Day is about underage drinking. And so these are two separate events. The people that take part in these St. Pat are not the same. I mean, there might be some crossover, but
You have about 20 seconds left.
okay. So I'm saying that I'm asking that time extension doesn't happen on March 17th, because what happens is people just loiter outside these places that are amplifying music. It causes a lot of street congestion and a lot of disruption for residents.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any other members of the public that wishes to speak to this issue? I'm not seeing any, so I will look for a motion to close. Councillor Salih has moved it, and Councillor Pelosi second. So we'll vote on that.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
So, Mr. Katolik, I wonder if you could address some of the concerns that were raised.
Yes, through the chair. Firstly, with respect to the housekeeping item with the 6 months, the bylaw is very prescriptive currently in saying that a temporary noise permit cannot be extended beyond 6 months. We do get applications all the time from developers, builders, that they need to go beyond the 6 months. Our response simply is in 6 months, you need to reapply and go through the process again. I find that highly inefficient because we are approving those applications. With respect to 6 months and patios, patios do have amplified music beyond 6 months. Rarely do they have it for 12 months, but as staff, we require flexibility in administration to allow some patios, because we look at each patio application on its own merit, to allow some patios to go beyond the 6 months. With respect to the annual reporting, we have not reported annually for several years. Previous council asked us to use the internet more efficiently. So as soon as we issue a temporary noise permit, be it for construction noise or for amplified live music on patios, we post it on our internet. So if council wanted a report, the report would be short. It would simply say all the information is on the internet. This is very useful for the surrounding public that live beside the developments that have received temporary noise permits and patios. With respect to St. Patrick's Day, we will have extra staff working St. Patrick's Day looking at noise. Council has the option in its deliberation, or committee does, to take the 17th off because it is St. Patrick's Day and the Juno event will be happening on that day. So if council wishes, they can simply say, or committee wishes, March 14th to March 16th.
Thank you. I have one question based on the residents' comments. What is the public recourse if somebody does violate the bylaw, if a patio has amplified music without a permit?
Through the chair, the public could certainly call our office or the police. I also do want to mention the discretion in enforcement. There are a lot of patios, other facilities that do have ambient music playing throughout the day in the wintertime. In fact, we have ambient music playing at Dundas and Richmond, classical ambient music. And if council provides direction that they want strong enforcement on that ambient music, I'm in your hands. Please provide that direction and we will enforce the bylaw.
Councillor Sully.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the staff report, and thank you to the members of the public for coming today and speaking to this. So I'm prepared to move the motion, the staff recommendation as is. I think it's a good balance. I think it's appropriate. You know, I heard the concerns, and I think the questions were answered. And I think, you know, I've had the opportunity to see the impacts of March break in our community, whether it was in my ward or whether it's in downtown, and seeing, you know, emergency services and bylaw and all the partners and fire working together to make sure we can have a good and safe community for everyone. I think having patios and having sound on the 17th in particular, being St. Patrick's Day, makes even more sense because we want to draw people to the patios and away from residential areas. Obviously, there's going to be residential areas near to businesses, but most likely the majority won't be the case. So I think the closer we can get people away from, you know, streets and away from Fleming Drive and streets like that and to the patios, I think makes sense. And as well as hearing the concerns about having to have developers and companies come every 6 months to renew these permits seems, it doesn't make sense. It's not efficient, as was said by the chief bylaw official, as well as I just think it's just an added obstacle for business people in this community, and I think we always want to strive to do better to ensure that we can have an environment where jobs are created, and I think there's a benefit. So I'm happy to move the motion, and I'll look for a seconder.
Any other comments? Councillor Pelosa? Okay.
Thank you, through the chair. Just a question for Mr. Katolik in regards to the permit fees. If we're extending the application period from 6 months to 12 months, is there going to be a change in the fee structure that goes along with that?
Through the chair, the fee structure is quite low. It's $170, and we do not anticipate any changes.
Councillor Lewis.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I was just indicating I'd second Councillor Saleh's motion.
Councillor Kayabaga.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have some questions for staff. So if patios are applying, if they're applying for permits for 12 months, for a period of 12 months, does that mean that we know that people don't play music for 12 months? And if it's, this is not going to go up to 1 a.m. This is only, the 1 a.m. Gap is only from March 14th to 17th, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And it's my understanding that everyone who applies will have to go through a vetting process, and you can either approve it or not approve it.
That's correct.
And I just had a question as to why everyone gets to apply for this permit during that period to play till 1 a.m. If the bars or the patios that are applying are not affiliated to the Junos event.
Through the chair, the intent was to create an opportunity for patios to apply for up to 1 a.m. And I want to focus that it's up to 1 a.m. Each application is looked at, evaluated on its own merit. So for example, a bar that applies till 1 a.m., it's surrounded by single family homes, will likely not get a permission to play till 1 a.m. Perhaps that might be even shorter than midnight, might go till 11 a.m. But we, throughout this process, when it began last spring, we've issued 10 applications throughout the city. We know that there's more than 10 patios that are playing live amplified music, but we're not getting a barrage of neighborhood complaints.
Thank you. So for the period of March 14th to 17th, the patios that will be applying to play until 1 a.m., how many of those, have we received any applications? And if we have, how many of those are actually affiliated to the Junos event? Are we providing this permit to everyone, or are we only providing it to specific bars that will be in affiliation to the Junos events?
Through the chair, this is a citywide amendment. We have not received any applications because the amendment hasn't passed council yet. If it does pass council, it'll be a rather swift review process because of the timing.
And if there's a violation on the bylaw, and staff mentioned that people can report through the police or call the office, are we going to get a provision of the list of bars that have applied and have been approved and are able to play this amplified music until 1 a.m., or are we not?
Yes, through the chair, that would go on the city as an internet site.
Thank you.
Any other comments? So we have a motion on the floor. It's been moved by Councillor Sully to Keabaga, go ahead. Sorry, Councillor Keabaga.
One more question. Can you kind of just go over on what the housekeepings are? Because it says here, that it's to extend until 1 a.m. and other housekeeping amendments. Can we kind of get an idea of what those housekeeping amendments are?
Through the chair, there's two housekeeping amendments. One is to extend the maximum permit period from 6 months to 1 year, so that's up to. The other housekeeping item is reporting. We currently report as soon as we issue a application or an approval on the city's website.
Councillor, that's good. So we have a motion moved by Councillor Sully and seconded by Councillor Lewis. I'm not seeing other comments or questions, so we can go to vote on this.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Okay, that brings us to item 3.2, which is London's Cultural Prosperity Plan update. And I'm going to go to staff first. Go ahead, Mr. Stafford.
Thank you, and through the chair. As a representative of Parks and Recreation, I just want to take this opportunity to formally welcome Ms. Robin Armistead, Manager of Culture, and Corey Crossman, the Music Development Officer, to our service area. We work closely and we align very closely with them as we've had events in our area and support the arts community in many ways. And we look forward to our future together. So Ms. Armistead's here today to take you through a presentation on our Cultural Prosperity Plan update. It's to be received for information, and it relates to the 2015 to 2019 strategic plan. And I'd also like to take this opportunity, a lot of the fine partners that we have in culture are with us here today to see this presentation and to support the presentation. So I want to thank them for being here today as well. Over to Ms. Armistead.
Thank you. Come on on, and everybody, I believe if there's a presentation, just toggle your screen. Welcome to everybody from the community that's here for this.
Through the chair, I'm very proud to welcome my cultural partners, and it's been 6 years since we have brought forward the Cultural Prosperity Plan to Council, which was adopted in 2013. The impetus for bringing forward the Cultural Prosperity Plan and its predecessor, the Creative City Task Force report, was that it's still the same thing. The young creatives were leaving London. And so we really felt that we needed to mobilize together and work together to create a vibrant community for London. The vision for this Cultural Prosperity Plan, which is still in place, is that culture is at the heart of our thriving and vibrant city and plays an important role in building economic and community growth, attracting and retaining talent, informing municipal decision-making processes, and elevating London as a regional cultural center. We went out to consult with the community, and they told us what culture was to them. So culture being arts, diversity, education, food and agriculture, heritage, libraries, the Thames River, and a touch into the environment and tourism. The Cultural Prosperity Plan really has 4 chapters. Strengthen culture to build economic prosperity, support cultural programming, leveraging London's cultural assets, and celebrating and promoting culture. It also had a background document called London's Cultural Profile Report. And it was really 3 documents of cultural mapping, which we have on our GIS system, economic impact of culture, and the cultural facilities and infrastructure in the community. The big number that we really look back at, what we were trying to do, was to get the GDP number of $540 million for the cultural sector. So if I leave you with anything today, and that number is being updated through our cultural consortium, is that culture is a sector unto itself, and it is important, and it contributes to the economy of London. Where are we now with the implementation of the Cultural Prosperity Plan now that we're 6 years in? All the strategic directives and the objectives have been actioned, and the economic case for culture has been made. We're continuing through continuing investment, which results in increased leveraging. You'll see more growth in culture in London. Where are we now? Culture is being fostered through cultural programming and placemaking with our community partners. It's an inclusive and welcoming atmosphere is being created. Cultural assets are being maintained, and awareness of culture is being built. So one of the things we always said was, London has a lot of culture, but people don't always know what we have. The Culture Plan aligns with London's other planning documents and strategies. So here you see the London Cultural, the London Music Strategy and the London Plan. We also have done quite a bit of work, as you know, and resulting in the Junos. We did the London Music Census through Corey Crossman and the London Music Office. So to say we have 875 post-secondary students studying music, $7 million in songwriting royalties, 55 live music venues, total seating capacity 57,000, 4,620 live shows, 17 commercial recording studios. So today, we're bringing forward to you a hard copy of Our City, Our Culture. This is the Cultural Prosperity Plan update. And the update itself has a number of chapters in it, just to show you what is culture. That culture brings economic prosperity, animating London through the arts, honoring Indigenous and First Nations is part of our identity of London, preserving our heritage and telling our story. Public art and monuments, investing in shared creative spaces such as My Dundas Place, and A Healthy Core is our cultural showcase. Both Old East Village was a pilot for us, and because it is a natural cultural district that is just happening, and also downtown London, and just celebrating our culture is really important. Where are we going? Well, what we're planning to do now is to enhance the Cultural Prosperity Plan, which will still be in place, by focusing on key areas of focus. So what we're going to do is more of a balance between cultural initiatives with our cultural organizations that enhance quality of life, as well as having direct economic impact. So you'll see that the arts are branching into the health sector, et cetera. Investment in cultural industries. This may be film, this is music, to create jobs and training. You know, this is something that we might focus on more in the heritage sector, to really encourage heritage entrepreneurism. Telling our stories of all Londoners. Everyone that lives in London, culture is for Londoners. And creative facilities and spaces investment is the complementary to having vibrant festivals and events. What's the vision for London's creative future? A vibrant city that attracts and retains creative talent. Again, the message hasn't changed. Culture is for Londoners. It tells our story. And just wanted to say thank you very much to all the cultural institutions and organizations and our boards and commissions that have really worked hard to put culture on the map for London. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Armistead. And thank you to everybody that's here again. Any comments or questions from committee on the update? Oh, Councillor Squire, go ahead.
I don't mind speaking first. You may have noticed that in the past. First of all, thank you very much for the report. And I also want to congratulate you. You didn't ask for any money out of the tourism fund. So I'm really, I was sweating for a while, but now I feel a little more relaxed. I want to ask you specifically, because my background is as a school board trustee and school board chair. And I know from my involvement with both school boards that some of the most creative and talented people come out of both of those local school boards as well as Western University. And I know some people here from Western. I don't know if they're here on possibly another matter. But, you know, yearly we see the talent coming out of those communities. And if you go to Beale Secondary School, for instance, you'll see a board there with the names of people who have taken their talent to a really high level. So I'm interested in how you're relating to those educational facilities, because on their own, they're cultural facilities. For instance, in the summer, I can go see Shakespeare performed at Western, any number of activities. So I'm really interested in that relationship and the relationship with the two school boards in particular.
Well, through the chair, thank you for that. We definitely work with our community partners, the London Heritage Council and the London Arts Council and Tourism London, to market all the goings on with culture in London. We do specifically work in heritage with the public history program of Western, and we will be going together with a new kind of podcast telling our story here program coming up in the near future in April. We work with the Western's fine art area, definitely in connection with the Mackintosh Gallery, and the Museum London is here today. We certainly we work through our community partners, both through Museum School, which works directly with the school boards, and also the London Artist in Residence program with the Arts Council, and the various reiterations of the different programs of working with school children and the Thames Valley School Board and the Roman Catholic School Board, which goes further than London to integrate the arts and culture into the schools. I can also tell you that right now our music officer, Corey Crossman, has been taking the Junos Awards around to various schools within the Thames Valley School Board, connected with the Arts Council's schools that they're linked into, to kind of spread the love with the Junos so that it's not just totally London-centric. And if you want, he can speak to what he's doing on that as well.
I guess my point is that there's tremendous talent in those educational facilities, and having been the chair of the London District Catholic School Boards, I saw it firsthand. There were performances and art everywhere I went. And so all I'm saying is that that any liaison with the school boards is going to open your organization up to a whole new array of talent that quite frankly comes really cheap too. They like to perform as part of their training. So I think, I'm sure you're doing great work. I just throw that out there as something that you could look at in addition to what you're doing.
Councillor Lewis, then Mayor Holder, then Councillor Salee.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll start by just echoing Councillor Squire's comments, and he and I, as well as Councillor Ploza and Councillor Morgan, had the privilege on New Year's Eve of hearing some of that young talent with one of the bands that performed in the park. There's certainly great talent there, and London certainly is a music city. I wonder if you could comment just briefly. There's certainly a page in the report here that mentions some of our public art monuments with regard to our military history in the city. I wonder if you could comment. I want to go to the other end of the spectrum. How much are we engaging with our seniors and our veterans community in particular in terms of sharing their stories and that part of London's history as part of our culture?
Through the chair, we certainly have done a number of monuments recently related to the military and veterans. The Culture Office provides funding toward Remembrance Day and also to the Peacekeeper Day in August. And we have done the LAV 3, which is at Wolseley Barracks, which our partner from the RCR Museum is here today. We have took a long time to investigate the Simcoe World War I Memorial and decided that it was most appropriate to stay close to the in situ to the original school site in Soho. So that was a project last year as well. So we work very closely with the veterans community, and we hope that they feel comfortable working with us and certainly with the Heritage Council as well.
That's wonderful to hear. And just as a quick follow-up, there was some highlight in there about the royalties from songwriting, and that's obviously, you know, again, part of the great push that we've had on the Music City branding for London. I wonder if you could provide through the chair any comment on writers in-house, I guess, people who are writing for the literary scene as opposed to the music scene, and what sort of impact that has in London culturally.
Well, I know that there's a festival for writing that happens at Museum London every year that receives CAPE funding as one of the initiatives. I would have to probably turn to my music officer to talk about songwriting initiatives. Maybe, Corey, do you want to just say a couple words?
Yes, as Robin had said, that fact is information that we gather from SOCAN. So they look after royalties and songwriting registration. And so we're one of the only cities in Canada that actually have figures and facts like that to know how many we have. And what's interesting about that is it allows us to measure moving forward and track our growth. So it's a baseline metric that we have now. But we are doing ongoing workshops and opportunities. We have a monthly series called Music Talks that allows industry professionals as well as musicians to connect and discuss, make connections, and they really vary. These workshops can vary, whether it be focused on songwriting or it can be focused on granting, the business side of music. So, working with the Songwriters Association of Canada, actually, and we have some events coming up at the mall at Masonville that are focused on songwriting and building those skills. So there's quite a bit we're doing in songwriting.
Mayor Holder.
Thank you. I don't think we can say enough times how important the arts are to our community. Ms. Armstead, thanks very much for that précis of just giving a brief glimpse of the arts in London. You know, it's just a touch, just scratches the surface of so many things we do and why it matters so much to the city in terms of not just keeping young people, keeping all people in London interested in our city. But for everything from cultural and performance arts, I won't repeat all the things that you've shown there. A couple of things. For those who don't know, Mr. Crossman is responsible for organizing our national anthem singer at the start of every meeting. That's a recent undertaking. And as a result of that, we have not had a loss. We've never had to actually ever listen to Councillor Hillier singing as a result of that. So I would invite members of the gallery and anyone that has an interest, particularly if you want to avoid hearing Councillor Hillier sing, or me, I would encourage you to contact Mr. Crossman, because that's great. Because you know what it does? It showcases some of our local talent and gives them some exposure, which is, I know they appreciate, but we learn to respect and also appreciate as well. And there may be some innovative ways to do the anthem, Mr. Crossman. I will leave that to you to consider as well. But through your chair to Ms. Armstead, you mentioned the reference to RCR Museum, and certainly at Wolseley, I have huge respect for our veterans and also what the museum represents. I'd like to point out there's another significant museum. There's certainly some things on display at 427 Wing, but also at HMCS Prevost. We have a naval base in London, Ontario, reserve training base at the Forks of the Thames. So if you're looking at Brian Meehan's museum, that's what we call it, across the river, you'll see this low red brick building at the Forks of the Thames. And it's our reserve training base for our naval, our young naval people, as well as also now a facility for our Air Force training. And but there, I would point out on the hill is the Battle of the Atlantic Memorial, which honors every person whose life was lost during the Battle of the Atlantic between 1939 and 45. And I commend it for all of us to see that. It's very powerful. Forgive the pun, it was dead space. And what one of the more thoughtful members of Prevost did was said, let's use it to honor those whose lives were lost. And it's headstones of every ship that was lost during the Battle of the Atlantic, with their name, the numbers of lives lost. When I was once in federal politics, we put some significant support behind it, but the community has really rallied in support of that. So I'd make sure it's on your walking tour as well, Ms. Armstead. And I just want to say thanks to you and to the arts community. You're so important to what we do in London. So this was a soliloquy, not a question, but it was intended to say well done. And to our gallery colleagues and friends, just keep making London proud. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Sully.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to staff for bringing the report. Great work. Just to clarify, I know it was mentioned a few D&D or Department of National Defense properties. So I used to have a pecuniary interest, as you all know. I've retired. I just want to clarify that just in case there was any concerns. So that's why I'm continuing to engage in this conversation. Anyway, moving forward, I did have some questions on the London Cultural Profile. I know some of the stats there are dated, and I recognize that out of our control sometimes, 2006, 2011. But you know, is it safe to say that because I feel as if we've done significantly a great amount of work in just a short period of time, whether it's the 1 year, 2 year, 4 year mark, but some of the stats are from 7 years ago. And so is it safe to say that, you know, we've gotten significant more jobs in this area and significant more dollars are coming in? And do we know how we're able to get that kind of information moving forward? I know it's a little hard. I'm not sure if you or Corey or whoever may be able to help with that.
Through the chair, yes, I belong to the Creative City Network of Canada Cultural Consortium. So since the time that we had to do it ourselves individually as London to find out what the GDP number was, the Cultural Consortium is a group of over 40 municipalities across Canada, and they are working with 2016 Statistics Canada data, but it's just not, I'm just not able to release it yet, but definitely it has gone up.
Great, that's great news. So I guess in the next update, we'll potentially see that information. I'll leave that as a question. And the second part is, with the current data we have now, do we know if there's a reference place where you can get more of a breakdown of some of that data, where specifically in those cultural jobs look like, where maybe there has been some growth, where there hasn't, so we can maybe make adjustments, or we as a city can do more?
Through the chair, what we were trying to do with the London Music Census of 2016 was to drill down specifically for music. And so when Corey first joined us, we hired a summer student, and we're hoping to hire another summer student this summer to maintain that information, because that's the best way that we know how to do it, because you have to phone the venues, et cetera, to find out what their latest numbers are.
Great, thank you. And that's all my comments. So I just wanted to say, I guess, continue to keep doing the great work. I think the data really helps, and hopefully when the new data comes out, we're able to have, a breakdown of what those cultural jobs looks like, because I think that'll be very helpful for us in knowing where we can make more investments and where other areas might need more support.
Great, thank you. So I wonder, without putting you on the spot, Ms. Armistead, if you could just name the organizations that are here today. Like I see Iceland and Arts Council, I see Tourism London. If you could just...
I apologize if I forget anybody. There's the Heritage London Foundation is here. Downtown London is here. Tourism London is here. Budweiser Gardens is here. The London Heritage Council is here. The RCR Museum is here. Museum London is here. The London Public Library is here. The Grand Theatre, Oldies Village, our own Neighborhood and Children and Fire Services is here. Don Clayton was here related to the Terry Fox Foundation, the London Arts Council, big contingent. And if I've forgotten anybody else, I'm sorry.
Excellent, thank you so much. And I think that's a testament to the kind of community we have in arts and culture here in London. And you talk about retaining creative talent in London, and I think it goes beyond that. I think when you have a really vibrant cultural scene in a city, it snowballs, it ripples out to all sorts of things, and it ends up attracting investments like Maple Leaf Canada and other kinds of corporate investments like that, because they're interested in having a city where their future employees will want to live. And so thank you to everybody for contributing to that and for doing the great work that you do. And I think we will need a motion to receive this report, moved by the mayor and seconded by, wow, a whole host of people. Councillor Pelosa.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. And now we are going to circle back to item 2.5, which is the unsanctioned and unsafe street parties. And staff would like to introduce this item for us.
Yes, thank you very much. Just wanted to give a bit of a background on the issue of unsanctioned street parties. Certainly this specific issue of unsanctioned street parties is not unique to London. In fact, it's occurring amongst numerous municipalities across Ontario, if not across North America. And in Ontario, the Municipal Act, which provides jurisdiction, it has a specific section there about nuisances, and the jurisdiction allows for municipalities to pass public nuisance bylaws to address such issues. And back in 2007, we wanted to be a little proactive in looking at some research at nuisance parties. There were no Ontario municipalities that had the public nuisance bylaws to deal with nuisance parties. So we thought we'd visit Michigan State, City of East Lansing. They have a lot of experience with public nuisances and nuisance parties because every other Saturday or so, there's 75,000 people at a football game there. And sometimes they leave the football game happy, sometimes they leave the football game angry, but in both cases, it does create an issue about crowd control and public nuisances. And at that time, we presented this to the Town and Gown Committee together with our partners at Fanshawe, at Western, and council at that time at the Town and Gown Committee in 2007 found that this might be a little bit too harsh to have police powers where parties could be broken up by bylaw, by police, prior to them becoming large public nuisances, if not riots. And then St. Patrick's Day happened in 2012. I'm not going to get into the details. I'm sure everybody knows what occurred on Fleming in that neighborhood. And the debate then was, what can the municipality do more to address these issues? So we dusted off the 2007 draft bylaw, made a couple tweaks to it, held some public participation meetings, so large that they were held at the convention center, and passed the nuisance bylaw, which deals specifically with social gatherings where the conduct of the persons create nuisances both on public property and private property. And these are some of the types of things that are created or contribute to nuisances, either singularly or together. And most recently, 2 years ago, we amended the nuisance bylaw to deal with broofing, which is I guess a technical term, but it deals with drinking on rooftops. We never thought that we'd have to pass an amendment to a bylaw where we're actually protecting people against themselves, but it did become a trend, specifically in town and gown municipalities. The previous trend was to pull a couch out, put it on a front street, and torch it. The nuisance bylaw has certain provisions in terms of charges, so you can be charged for sponsoring, conducting, attending, hosting, and such a nuisance party. This provision has been used numerous times by London Police citywide, not only in the near campus neighborhoods around Fanshawe and Western. And in fact, it was recently used for somebody that created a Facebook site to create what turned out to be a nuisance party. So moving forward, we've created a policy team that's looking at policies both from a city's perspective. We're reviewing the nuisance bylaw to see if it needs to be tweaked to strengthen it. We're working with Western. They're looking at the student code of conduct. Student Union is looking at alternative events on those days where there are anticipated nuisance issues. And then moving from that, we have a timeline of coming back to this committee if there are any changes to the public nuisance bylaw with any amendments. Western would go to their Board of Governors should they be seeking any amendments to their student code of conduct. And then we move into operational matters, so strong enforcement on education and communications, both with the public, with those that attend anticipated nuisance parties, and a focus on this year connecting with the school boards, because not only has this become a bucket list, a rite of passage for university college students, but we're finding that a lot of high school students are attending this event. And we have to ask ourselves, why are so many people attending this event? Why are so many people attending Ezra Street in Waterloo for St. Patrick's Day? And I think some of the answers are they want to be there, they want to be seen, and they want to see. And the reality is that there's a lot of issues occurring there. There's a lot of risky behavior occurring. And that behavior is being videotaped and within literally seconds put on the internet. So we have to look at a number of different factions of why these events are causing such an attraction to the youth. And we had a summit last Friday in Waterloo. There was numerous municipalities across Ontario, both cities, London, or police services, and universities and colleges. And the conclusion at that summit was that there's no one silver bullet answer. There's no magic wand that somebody can just swing and say, you know, this one thing is going to solve these parties. We need the community, we need the educational facilities, we need sociologists, we need people that have expertise in marketing to assist in how we focus on information about these nuisance parties, because I think I wouldn't be over-exaggerating in stating that if these continue, there will be a fatality at these events, simply for the risky behavior that's being undertaken, mostly under the influence of drugs and alcohol, and the sheer volume of people at these events. The street can't contain 20, 30,000 people, and the crowd is so tight that there could be a very serious risk to public safety. Together with me today is Jenny Massey, the Associate Vice President of Student Experience from Western, should you have any questions with respect to Western, and also Dave O'Brien, who deals with emergency management on those days. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Katolik. I'll look to committee. Councillor Sully.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And, you know, this is, of course, an important conversation. Myself and Squire, we always go out and during Brofdale and checking it out every year. It's become our tradition, so I'll see you again soon, Squire. Through the chair to staff, I did have a question. And I'm not sure if it's you or maybe with Western, but when we look at some of the communication pieces, and I know in the past, there's a lot of tweets and things like that, but I'm wondering, have we in the past done Instagram ads to really push those on the top of the notifications? Because I know they use a lot of stories and a lot of the specific hashtags, and I'm wondering if maybe that's a way to kind of make it very clear to some of those students about some of the consequences that they may face. So I guess I'll start with that question. And then my other question, maybe this one's to Ors. I know you're saying you're going to come back in April 2019, but if there is an opportunity to come back before March break with any recommendations to council, is that something that you think would be realistic, recognizing that there's St. Paddy's Day and some of the bylaws that you might have or suggestions that you come forward with in April might help benefit us in this upcoming month, recognizing there may be some challenges?
Through the chair, I'll focus on the second question, and our partners can perhaps focus on the first question. This is the last CAPS meeting before March 17th. There definitely will be an operational plan for March 17th, recognizing there's also the night of the Junos. So we are working together as a team. It's being led by Mr. O'Brien on an emergency management plan, you know, for that day and for that week. In terms of using social media, certainly the city uses social media, but nuisance events are normally tactically focused on the police. So they're the ones who are sending out the "don't come to our party" tweets, because they're on the ground, and they're the ones who are largely responsible for social media at these events.
I would be happy to respond to questions around communication to our students. I'm here from Western. Over the last few years, we have tried a number of different approaches to encourage students not to attend the Brofdale Street Party. It is always a careful balance between ensuring we get important messages out around student safety and inadvertently promoting the street gathering. We did have an opportunity to meet with colleagues across the province last week, and a number of those universities are working closely with their student unions to be really thoughtful about the way in which we message to the contemporary student population. We have now established a working group that is looking specifically at communications and education, and it's our anticipation that that will actually messaging will be embedded in all the programs, resources and supports provided by Student Experience throughout the academic year around making wise choices, looking out for each other, being safe, being a respectful member of the London community, so that it doesn't only ramp up in the weeks leading to the end of September, but is part of what we expect from students day in, day out.
Thank you, Ms. Massey, and thank you for coming to committee today. Councillor Sully?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just to follow up, so my experience has been, I recognize that, you know, the communication, when the rest of the students arrive, they hear about it, they know the message, but I think what I was trying to get at is that the day of, social media really is and I watch it, is filled with just the party side of it. And, you know, you'll get some police tweets and stuff that get really, you know, pushed down. And again, the Instagram is really kind of where it's at, and sometimes Snapchat. So what I was only suggesting was that pushing through ads to really kind of be able to just give them that gentle reminder there, versus where we've seen it as, here's your pamphlet, here's your information throughout the academic year. I think they all know that there's a consequence to it, but I think if it's right there on their phone while they might be intoxicated on the street, and that's the first thing they're seeing on their Instagram before then they post what they're going to do or maybe going to do, I think might be that last kind of a pause that they might have. And I think that's sometimes an effective thing, because as I watch through social media, all I see is the good stuff and the good times, but I'm not seeing a potential of a consequence that gives me that pause. And I think that might be an opportunity. So just wanted to put that out there. So whether it's Western, whether it's our people at City, someone paying for it, but I think that there's some way of doing that, and maybe working with the student union to do some creative way on that day specifically.
Thank you very much for that suggestion, and we'll certainly look at that as our policy and communications team. We have been in contact with YouTube because we know that YouTube is used a lot by the youth to show things that have occurred and the speed that it's going online and going viral. A lot of the dangerous, risky things that occur there are because there's online challenges and there's peer pressure to, you know, do better and make it riskier. And certainly if YouTube can ban bird box challenges or tripod challenges, our position is that in communications with YouTube, they should also ban roof diving challenges, because certainly people can have and will get hurt doing roof diving, trying to break tables. So these are the types of solutions that we're looking at. It's not one enforcement solution that's going to solve this. It's going to come from various factions to resolve this issue over time.
Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. And as I read through the background material that we were provided, 57 persons hospitalized, 134 provincial offense notices, first responders costs in excess of $200,000. I mean, obviously this has become a very, very serious issue for the community. Through you, and probably this is to our VP of Student Experience, I know that there are universities elsewhere in the world, and certainly I've had a couple of European examples highlighted to me, Edinburgh being one, where the student code of conduct is such that behavior like this would get students expelled. And while that may seem heavy-handed, I agree that we are approaching a situation where a fatality is a very real possibility. So I wonder if you could speak to what's happening on the Western side of things with regard to toughening up the student code of conduct and enforcing penalties on that side of the equation.
Thank you so much for your question and for the opportunity to give you an update on where we are with a review of our Code of Student Conduct. We are in the process right now of reviewing the current code and exploring the possibility of expanding the code so it would be able to provide the opportunity for the university to take action in limited situations off campus. And so as we move forward, it is our hope that we will complete that consultation process by April to be able to make a recommendation to the board about how we might proceed.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. I share the concerns and thoughts of not only our speakers, but also councillors who have already spoken. I fear that a fatality, or more than one, is inevitable unless we're prepared to take very dramatic action. This is serious. And I'm not sure how much social media will assist when someone is impaired so dramatically as a result of drugs or alcohol. I'm not confident that the next thing they're doing is looking at their BlackBerry to see whether they would do the next really stupid thing, but maybe they will.
BlackBerry.
So, a couple of questions, if I might, through you, Chair. Firstly, I noted that last week universities got together, a number of them at Laurier, to discuss the issue of these various, I'll call it illegal gatherings. And it's not just universities, it's colleges, and it could be events. And I think we just heard about the potential concern about March 17th with a combination of two major things in London that will conspire to be together. So, notwithstanding Edinburgh, which is a great school, has any university in Ontario or Canada, or college in Ontario or Canada, dealt with this issue successfully and reported it back, such as you know? That's the first question I would have, through you.
Thank you for your question. I think perhaps to some extent it depends on how we define success. There are, as we've noted, a number of universities right across the province are dealing with really complex situations similar to the action that we see at Brofdale. They are all in the process of implementing a variety of different strategies that do include an expansion of their code of student conduct, for example, at some institutions, the implementation of alternative programming and so forth. They're all on that same journey. They're at different points in that journey, but they are beginning to look together right across the province to see about what kind of best practices we might employ. We have spoken to some institutions in the United States that have seen some success. And what we've learned from them is, first of all, this is a multi-year endeavor. We need to be realistic in that we're not likely to end the street party phenomenon in the province very quickly. The second is they've identified that it required all agencies pulling the various levers that they had at their disposal. So from a university standpoint, the Code of Student Conduct, from a city perspective, looking at the bylaws and the various other forms of enforcement that can be put in place. And then thirdly, the importance of clear messaging and education to students throughout the year, and also alternative programming. So as we're putting forward a really robust plan and collaborative plan, both with the university and with our city partners, it's being done, we're developing that based upon some of the best practices we've seen across North America, and we're also sharing good practices across the province.
Thank you for that. I think you certainly have the support, we as a city. This is not just a Western issue, to be clear. This event, this fake homecoming, brings people from other educational institutions, people not working, people from out of town who come to our event. And I think we have to be extremely dramatic and clear as a council and as educational institutions to say it is not acceptable. And I'm not prepared, quite frankly, to wait for years to get this fixed. Because if that death happens this year, or several, we can look back and say, what did we not do today that could have prevented that happening? And serious injuries, and other things like reputation and the like. It has to stop. And I think we have to make an absolutely clear position that it's not only just not acceptable, but it stops now. And if there are bylaws that we need to put in force to help strengthen what needs to be done, then I'll look to staff to help us put that together. We have very capable staff to help us do that. And I would certainly support that. The second thing is, the second thing is that I think we need to have extremely clear, extremely strong academic sanctions, which can ultimately mean an expulsion, which I think is probably the biggest sanction that can happen. You prevent somebody from getting their degree, or if they're a college student, you get for their diploma, and you say, if you're convicted, you're done. And you know, it's interesting, I just read a report recently on something totally different relative to red lights, the cameras in the various districts. And did you know that when we put strong, aggressive enforcement in, interestingly, crime goes down? We put strong economic sanctions in now, and we say bloody enough. We do that to students, and I don't care if that's the university or college. We say that's enough, and you know what? I suspect that the crowds will diminish because people are going to be too concerned about losing their academic year or their degree. And if we are not prepared as an educational institution to take that strong a stand now, you said it has to go before the board. I suspect it would have to go in front of Senate as well. Because Senate has, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong on that, but under the bicameral system of Western, and I used to be on their board, and I'm now back on their board, I will certainly be making that point extremely strongly, that we cannot have another 2018. That repeat has to stop. And I cannot say it seriously enough, because there will be blood on all of our hands. That sounds dramatic, but there will be, because of people being stupid or encouraged by others to be stupid. And then as a result of that, some serious things will happen. Although I was not invited by Councillor Sally and Squire to attend the Carnage View in the Broughdale area, I did go there the next day, and it looked like a slum. And it was filthy, and it was disgusting. And I spoke to residents and students who were equally disappointed and disgusted. Let's stop the black eye. And so I say to our Mr. Kratolik, if there are bylaw pieces that we need in place, please bring them forward, please guide us, and you might give us some wisdom as to what that could look like. And to Western, I say enough is enough. We need you to help us help London. And I say that with the deepest of respect of my alma mater, because we cannot afford to have someone die as a result of this. And I don't think we're being at all dramatic as we say that.
Thank you. We share your concerns about what's happening at the end of September on Broughdale, and the entire university administration is working really hard to find solutions and a way forward. Just as a matter of clarification, the Code of Student Conduct is a board policy, so it will go to the board. It is intended to be an educational tool for students, and so we do need to ensure that the consequences are congruent with the infraction that's brought forward. And then another really important point, I think, for everybody to really understand is that the Code of Student Conduct is a complaints-driven process. And this means that as part of our review of how we might amend the code, we're also working with our community partners to determine what would be the appropriate process for those complaints to be given to the office. So just so you can understand the journey, we actually need to receive into our office, the names of individuals that have breached the code, what they're, alleged to have done, and then some form of evidence that we can then use to adjudicate that case. So there are a few steps that we need to be cognizant of as we move forward. Simply amending the code without understanding or having a process in place to drive that information into the university will mean the code actually can't meet its full opportunities. And so part of the reason that we have the policy review team is to think through how we actually may be able to get that information into the institution.
Councillor Pelosa.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Certainly, I echo the mayor's sentiments that no one in London wants this to be the public perception of London or the students and the education they're getting. As much as we all love tourism, we don't want people coming from other towns to participate in these activities. Potentially the cost to life and the harm already done is substantial. And the financial burden that is with the residents, the City of London picking up the tab for some of it. Two-part question for you. Currently, is there any kind of a bill back or university contribution to the city to help cover these expenses that we're incurring as a city?
So the university covers the costs of the costs associated with providing security and our campus police force on the campus, and also, of course, all the costs associated with things like alternative programming. We do hire additional security for that day that work on and around the periphery of the campus. So we incur costs in conjunction with the city. We are very much aware of the consequences, the financial consequences, both to the city and to the university, and take that very seriously.
Thank you for those points. I am aware of some other cities who charge back or charge a fee to the university to help cover costs like this, certainly securing your grounds, and we know it spreads out to the rest of the community, sadly. Having kids, I know when you're allowed to do something, it's never quite as much fun as if you weren't. Has there been any conversations regarding a sanction party that we could host in a facility that would be safer, that we can see what's going on and we would know where to put the resources and give them a good time, but a safe good time?
Yes, I'm really pleased that you raised that point. This past year, there has been a few attempts to do that over the years, and a lot of lessons learned, I think, in terms of both the timing and the design of that particular, we refer to it as alternative programming. This year, our student council, the USC, ran Purple Fest, which was an on-campus sanctioned activity that attracted around 11,000 students. There were some lessons learned in terms of the timing of headliner acts, and so we are now reviewing the alternative programming, and we'll be taking the lessons learned moving forward for implementation in this coming year. But we share your observation that providing safe, secure space for students to exhibit their school spirit and enjoy the end of September is one of the many mechanisms that we need to move forward with.
Okay, I have Councillor Squire, then the mayor again, then Councillor Helmer, and Councillor Sully. Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm obviously here because I'm the elected representative of Ward 6, where the Broughdale party takes place. And first of all, I'm here to say that I don't feel that currently in this process that either Ward 6 or their elected representative is an active player in the plans that are being made to deal with this issue. Yes, I've been told what people are doing. Yes, I went to the mayor's breakfast and saw it up on the screen that we were going to have a task force. Yes, I've heard about all that after it happens, after things have started. So after the last homecoming, I stood up and I spoke to the city manager. And so the results till then, from the point of view of the Ward 6 councillor, is that all meetings of the Town and Gown Committee, where I have the ability to speak to this issue, have been suspended. And I don't know how that happens. I don't know where the authority for that comes from, but staff has suspended those meetings, and there has not been a single Town and Gown meeting during that entire period. Obviously, planning has been going on and things have been going on during that time period. The next thing I heard about it was I met with Mr. Katolik. I was told what was happening. And then I got another notice. This was wonderful. The notice said, we're having a public meeting for people in your area to talk about the unlawful street parties. Oh, and by the way, it's at Banting Secondary School in Ward 7. What immediately goes into my mind is, what kind of counselor is going to be able to send this notice out to his community? And then I'm going to get the flyback, which is, that's great, Phil. So we're having a meeting about a problem in Ward 6 that a lot of us can't even get to. So it took me about 2 minutes to say, did you check out this location? Did you check out? Well, no, we didn't. But everybody's on a really tight schedule, so it's been really tough. So now, thankfully, the meeting is occurring in my ward where people can actually go to it. I say all this because I am, right now, the citizens of Ward 6 are not active participants in this process. As far as I know, their views have not been sought out. How they feel about this has not been sought out. What remedies they want. And I'm telling you right now that there's going to be issues if you don't start engaging very quickly with the elected representative of Ward 6 and the citizens of Ward 6. And I've seen this too many times before. where eventually a report comes back and says, here's what we're going to do. Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for that report. I've been to the homecoming for 5 years, and all I've seen is this event grow. And I know why it's grown. I can tell because I see the signs. It's because students want to say to their university, we can do what we want, we can do it where we want, and we can do it when we want, and everybody's just going to watch. Everybody's just going to watch. So when I hear from King's University College that they don't have a seat at the table, when I hear from the people of Ward 6 that they don't have a seat at the table, I hope somebody thinks about that as they move forward, because it's important. And I also want to say one more thing. Nobody has shown me yet that they're, and I'm glad the mayor spoke as he did, nobody has actually said to me they're prepared to deal with this matter seriously. After the last homecoming, I had an event at Western very soon after that. A lot of student leadership was there. And I said to them, so what did you think about all the partying on Broughdale? It was great. We think that was great. What's the big deal? What's the problem? This is student leadership. I was shocked to hear that, quite frankly. So I think you have a very entrenched event now. I think we've made it worse with most of the things we've done. For instance, changing the date to 2 different days was just saying, that was like a red flag in front of students saying, hey, we're telling you you can't. I've seen the signs and I can tell you I can't say the wording at this meeting, but it's pretty clear what they think about administration. This situation was dealt with, by the way, at Fanshawe College. Fanshawe College had the problem, and it showed it earlier, and this is the ultimate step, which maybe eventually will have to be considered. There are criminal code provisions which deal with the matter in an unlawful assembly. If you declare an area an unlawful assembly and people do not leave that area within the prescribed time, they are charged criminally. Is that an extreme step? Yeah, it is. And I'd hate to see it happen, but maybe we're going to get there. Maybe we're going to get there. And I think everybody should think about that a little bit. Now, right now, what I'm doing is I'm going to do my own work. I'm meeting with Western next week, and I want to thank them very much for inviting me. So I'm going to continue to represent Ward 6. We're having a community meeting that's now been moved to St. Michael's Catholic Church next Monday. I hope there'll be Western representatives there. I hope there'll be student representatives from Western there so they can hear from the community. But right now, I am not convinced that we're taking this problem as seriously as it has to be taken. So we'll see what happens. But I share the frustration of my colleagues, but I also share the view of the citizens in Ward 6. And here's what they say to me. They say to me, why do we have to obey the law? Why do we have to apply for a permit to have a street party? Why are we expected to behave ourselves? And yet students don't have to. And I also say this in closing, the vast majority of Western students make an amazing contribution to the City of London. And their efforts and the work they do is being denigrated by this one event. By this one event on one day, all of the good work that they're doing in the course of a year is being reduced in the extreme. And I want Western to keep that in mind also.
Mayor Holder.
Thank you very much, Chair. Through you, I think what's clear is that enforcement works. And it's to whatever degree we choose, and is chosen, to bring some order for the sake of safety and for the sake of the citizens of Ward 6, the students who attend Western, and all the invitees that attend our various get-togethers. My question to Mr. Gertoluk is this. If you had your way, and you could prepare some bylaws or a bylaw that would support better safety on issues when there are large crowd gatherings like this, changes that would be in place or that you could put in place now. Could you offer an opinion as to what that could look like in the sense of what a bylaw could either be amended to or put in place that would support the spirit of, I think, where we as council are going to protect our citizens?
First, allow me to give a preamble that I once spoke in the wheel of enforcement, and this is a largely public safety, emergency response type issue, but I will offer some comments. I would focus on two things, and that would be communications and consequences. Communications have to go out not only to the students, because we know there's busloads coming from other municipalities to this event. It's become a bucket list, a rite of passage. I would focus on communications to the school boards that would be distributed to the parents, because we've seen parents drop their kids off at the foot of Broughdale Street when the party isn't really rocking yet. And we need to look at communications, different forms of communications, and that's likely social media. In terms of consequences, I can tell you that I attended Queen's University. I won't tell you what date, but I can tell you Tragically Hip hadn't recorded an album yet. And I heard a lot of commotion outside of the grad residence, and there was a major party happening. And the mayor was in the police chief's car reading the Riot Act, which is specifically the criminal code issue that Councillor Squire alluded to. And then the beer bottles started. The next year, you couldn't spit in the street because there were so many police officers, not only from Kingston, but from across Ontario, and there was a cost to that. And that solution only lasted for a couple of years, because a few years later, another major party happened. But focusing on consequences, there needs to be consequences to those that do the most riskiest acts that affect public safety. So focusing on somebody carrying a beer down Huron Street might not need to be that harsh, but focusing on people jumping off roofs, trying to break tables, you know, the urination, the loud music, all that for their specific property, there needs to be consequences, not only from an enforcement perspective, but cost recovery. So we're looking at amending the nuisance bylaw for cost recovery to those tenants that are hosting these events. But provincially, also, there needs to be some action taken, because we know that if you get a parking ticket and you don't pay a parking ticket, it goes against your license. But if you get a nuisance ticket and don't pay the nuisance ticket, it doesn't go against your license. It goes into collections. So when you look at it from a strategic point, the cost of parking is going against your license, but the cost of doing more heinous acts is not. And interestingly, today in British Columbia, I can't remember the city, but council is asking that province to look at stronger consequences for bylaw type charges regarding these nuisance type gatherings. So in summary, communications is key, but also consequences.
Thank you, Mr. Katolik. Mayor Holder, you still have the floor unless you're done.
I'll say for now, I appreciate what Mr. Katolik has said in terms of provincial, and I don't think that's unreasonable. As I was hearing him say that, though, I was thinking, so you give somebody a $50 fine, like that's, and I don't know the level of fine, to be fair. But I don't think that's sufficient penalty to change outcomes or to change behaviors. And I think that, and again, this would be for Western, as it would be for Fanshawe, as it would be for, and it's really a message to those who are involved in these parties, that there has to be sufficient penalty, sadly, but I think that's the reality. There has to be sufficient penalty to alter behaviors and to impact consequences. I really believe you need that whole mix. And I don't dispute communication is critically important. I get that. And I think that's something we do really reasonably well, and I would say very well. But if there isn't serious penalties to change behaviors, then I don't think that those communications will have the same impact that we desire. That's my concern. I think I've covered that a couple of times now.
Councillor Helmer.
Thank you. First, I just want to declare a pecuniary interest if we're going to get into discussions around the city trying to recover costs from Western. Since Councillor Pelosa raised it, if the discussion keeps going, certainly not going to participate in that. In terms of the general issue about the unsanctioned party on Broughdale, I mean, I wish it were an easy thing to solve because it is a very significant problem. Those of us who are on council for the last few years, we've seen it get worse and worse. I've been out to the party myself. It's so many people, you can't even get your bike through. I biked out there, you can't even get around to go up and down the street to see what's going on, let alone get emergency services in there if somebody is overly intoxicated and needs medical attention. It's very, very dangerous. The problem, of course, is that there are very serious consequences to this behavior already. And we had a young man last year who jumped off a roof and was seriously injured. You know, so we don't need to have a fatality to know that there are serious consequences to some of these behaviors. That I don't think is enough, right? We passed, during the last council, we passed a new bylaw to say you can't do this roofing thing, you can't drink on roofs. And after that, someone jumped off a roof and was seriously injured. So we can make changes to the legislation and we can change how enforcement is happening, but I don't know that that's really solving the problem. You know, I think Councillor Squire understands the issue very well, which is part of it is like intentional disobedience against the institution, right? So they don't want to be told what to do, and this sort of was motivating a lot of the unsanctioned aspect of the party. Then there is the general problem of just a lot of people intoxicated doing very risky, very stupid things that could injure themselves or others very badly. And unfortunately, I don't think that our experience shows that enforcement on its own is actually going to solve the problem, because it's kind of a cultural phenomenon that is persisting across generations of students. So if you bring in sanctions on particular students, yeah, they might not organize the party anymore, but there's a whole new crop of new students who's getting socialized into the behavior. And even if it's a minority of students from Western, and I've been at the parties, I know there are students from Fanshawe there are students from high school there are students from other places at this party. There's a reason why it's so many people, and it's only a minority of Western students who actually participate, right? So it's not all Western students, it's not even half of Western students, it's a small proportion of Western students, and then it's a whole bunch of other people as well, and it adds up to an enormous group. And so the idea that one institution can make changes to their code of conduct and that's going to affect the problem, that's not the case. You know, that's not going to do anything to Fanshawe students. I think Councillor Salee is on the right track, which is anything that can be done to disrupt the audience for the stupidest and most risky behaviors. You know, that is what's motivating a lot of that. People are intoxicated, they think it is funny to have people engage in this really risky behavior. And the fact that there's going to be an audience, not just the people who are standing around looking, but the people who are recording on the cell phones and broadcasting it on Instagram or what have you. Disrupting the audience part is important, I think, for making it less attractive to do that kind of behavior in the first place, because they're already risking their lives, right? Whether you're going to get a criminal charge or a ticket, I mean, this is a very minor consequence in comparison to losing your life or being permanently injured. So, you know, I think it's a really tough problem. I wish there was a very easy solution. I think what I'm hearing from the VP at Western is, you know, it does require everybody to do their part. And I want to say, even though it's getting worse, I would agree it's getting worse, and it's a really bad problem. It could have been worse and would have been worse if everyone wasn't doing such a good job trying to contain it. And for example, the police, I think the police are doing a good job of trying to manage the crowd. We're not getting, you know, throwing beer bottles, smashing things, violence. You know, that's not happening, and it could be. If it was handled in a different way, it could get worse rather than better. So, you know, I wish I had a good solution to it. I'm not sure exactly what's going to be required. I'm glad that this kind of community meeting is happening, because certainly people who live in the area, you know, I think they've reached a breaking point quite a while ago in terms of their tolerance and willingness to tolerate that kind of behavior. And they're concerned, just like everybody else, for the students who are participating, all the people who are at this party, right? They don't want them to be injured either. So I'm not sure where it's headed. Unfortunately, I don't think there's really a lot of easy solutions, it's going to require a lot of different things along the way, and trying to learn from what other institutions are doing as well, because it's also not limited to London. We may have one of the worst ones, but it's not the only place.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sali.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be brief. Is the homecoming date still in October? I know it was moved, so I just want to know, is that, it's coming up in 2019, is that going to be on the original date or the newer date?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So just to recap, that the homecoming date was moved a couple of years ago, actually after some conversation with community members and law enforcement agencies that recognized that at that point the street party was growing quite significantly, and Western was encouraged to look at the date, and there was a conversation that ultimately led to the moving of the date back to October in the hope that that would curb some of the activity. Of course, hindsight's 2020, it didn't curb the activity. The next step that has been taken, which we're hopeful we'll see some reduction in crowds, but again, we really won't know until until the end of September, is that for this coming year, for fall 2019, presidents of 6 major universities worked with the Ontario Athletic Association to coordinate homecoming dates, to reduce the number of, we know that there are students that are buying tickets and moving right across the province to attend street parties from one municipality to another. So the traditional date of the Broughdale Street Party is at the end of September, September 28th, and we know a number of our peer institutions will be holding their homecoming dates at that time, and so we're hoping that that will reduce the flow of out-of-town guests on that particular day. So yes, it is going to be at the end of October, and that is part of a strategy, a provincial-wide strategy to coordinate our homecoming dates. It'll be on the same date as Queen's University.
And I appreciate that, and I've been following that piece. I know that was back in September 2018. The then Guelph Police Chief had asked the Ontario University's athletics to do that, and so it wasn't like, and I'm not saying the universities weren't taking a role, but it was the police chief in Guelph that had initiated that, and then now here we are, and now the universities are now responding and doing something. So what I've heard, and as you heard from Councillor Squire, when we're out there, we can see all the, and they particularly name the leadership on the graffiti, that's whether it's on bed sheets or on walls or whatever you want to call it. The frustration seems to be is that they simply moved the date. So now, as a police board member, and the chair in particular, I have to sign off on $100,000 and bring York Regional Police and bring more boots to help our city. And this is going to become an annual thing where we're going to have to continue to pay. And what I'm afraid of now is now we have 2 events. So now we're stretching our resources. And so when Londoners are asking for more services, and including the Western students, because they're waiting because response times are slower, or because they can't come to headquarters to speak to someone, it's because we're shifting resources and spending money elsewhere. So now that we kind of know that they're still going to come out in September anyway, you know, I guess my question is, why still go ahead with an October date? Why not just go back and just give me one big party instead of 1.5 parties? Because then I'm just paying for 2 things, and it just seems like it doesn't make sense to me. And I'm not sure if Western President was invited here, or you're just his representative. I haven't had an opportunity to meet with him, but hopefully he'll connect in the soon future. But hopefully the next time we have this conversation, he can also be here as well.
Thank you for that follow-up. It's my understanding, although I'm open to, I'm still new around here, so feel free to correct me if I've misunderstood. It's my understanding that we didn't have any significant challenges on our formal homecoming this past year. So we do recognize that there are situations that occur at the end of September, but I'm not certainly aware of anything anywhere close to that magnitude that happens in the formal homecoming in October. So we really do see this as a fairly, within the London and the Western kind of situation. We're fortunate in that, in contrast to our peer institutions that sometimes have 2 or 3 different dates where these things are emerging, we are currently focused on that one particular date at the end of September.
And just as a follow-up, not to get across the debate, but maybe Mr. Catola could tell us, I know that staff still prepare, I know LPS puts some of the resources that are needed in anticipation, and that's the problem. It's just because the people don't show up, we still plan to have the resources needed in the event that that does happen, and that has an impact. So Mr. Catola can maybe touch on that.
Yes, through the chair, we plan for both events, but certainly the fake homecoming is a larger event, largely because of social media. I just want to provide some information of a conversation we had with Kansas State University that has a fake St. Patrick's Day party. So St. Patrick's Day globally is March 17th, but there's a fake St. Patrick's Day party that has been going on for years and years, and they're looking for solutions. So even though all the cities in Kansas and globally celebrate St. Patrick's Day on the 17th, this one municipality has a fake St. Patrick's Day, and largely generated by social media, and they too are looking for solutions and are communicating with us.
Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I wonder if maybe the solution to this might just be to have all of council attend, and if we have enough old people there, it will take away all the fun from the students, because we're certainly able to spend lots of time in debate, and that might not engage them as much. But in all seriousness, I appreciate the provincial coordination of homecomings. I think that that's a step in the right direction. I certainly hear Councillor Squire's frustrations, and I would echo the mayor's comments for the real need for immediate action. I was reviewing for the second time the Civic Works report for this afternoon's committee meeting about the red light cameras, and the mayor's absolutely correct that that enforcement has led to a dramatic change in behavior and a decrease in serious injury and fatalities as a result. I wonder if I might find a seconder for this. It's certainly not a solution, but I think in one small step, having heard from Mr. Catola about the provincial necessity here, I would like to put a motion on the floor that the mayor be requested to write a letter to the government of Ontario requesting that they investigate enhanced enforcement of bylaw infractions, and that he do that on behalf of council, and at least put this on the province's radar. So I'll see if I've maybe got a seconder for that.
Councillor Lewis, I have a note down there to suggest that somebody make a similar motion, so I'd be happy to second that. Any other comments from committee? I know Councillor Squire would like to add some more.
So I appreciate the comments of the deputy mayor, because he's spot on. It's this rebelling against the man, so to speak, that's what I used to say in my younger days, in 60s and 70s. Stick it to the man, yes. The other part of it is that there are no consequences, and that is important, because I actually go there, and they're all the vast majority of the students there are just like our kids. They're our kids. They're not bad people. They're very, very heavily intoxicated, but they're euphoric over the idea that they're just being watched by police, and they're just being watched, and they can do whatever they want on this street. They can, basically do pretty much anything. And so until you attack that culture, it's going to be really difficult. That being said, I really want to finish and say to Ms. Massey, I really appreciate you being here. She's relatively new to this process, and I've been really impressed in terms of what she's prepared to do. I'm also very impressed that I'm going to be having my first meeting, actually, with a Western official one-on-one about matters next week. And that's not happened before, so I really appreciate that. And also to Mr. Katolik, I feel your pain. I mean, I know it's a difficult issue, but somehow we're going to have to continue to try to deal with it. But I don't think that means that we don't want to deal with it, but I just think it's just become so entrenched that it's going to be a difficult nut to crack. So again, thank you. I know this is a rough crowd, but this is a tough issue.
Mayor Holder.
Thank you. I acknowledge the motion and seconding of it. My view is anything that will lead to diminished inappropriate activity is another step in the right direction. And if this does pass, then I will certainly make that very clear. I don't know if there are any other jurisdictions that have done that successfully. You made a reference to one where it's been written, but it would be helpful, Mr. Kratolik, if there are other jurisdictions that have successfully done that, where you take basically a municipal bylaw infraction and make it provincially enforceable, which is what you're referencing here. And if that's possible, then I would be very interested in doing that. Again, a step, but I think it's because what we're trying to do is we're trying to alter some bad behaviors. And, you know, this issue is going to be compounded. We just sidebarred briefly that with the advent of cannabis, that this will be an even more exciting issue going forward. And I don't say that necessarily in the most positive way. When we look at various impairments, I think that may well challenge it. Obviously, what are we all trying to accomplish here? Not to eliminate folks having a good time, but we have to protect the rights of everyone and do it in a thoughtful way. So if we think this has, if committee believes that this has, and ultimately council believes that that putting this forward for provincial enforcement will assist, it certainly won't be the solution, but if it will assist, then I'm more than prepared to take it forward.
Through the chair, I just want to clarify that my comments were not focused on the enforcement, but the collection of fines. And as a former chair of the Ontario Town and Gown Association approximately 10 years ago, we presented that position to the Minister of Education and the Attorney General. It didn't go anywhere at that time, but I know that in our research there are other provinces that do have that plate denial process in addition to parking fines. So perhaps the draft resolution could be amended to focus on the collection of bylaw enforcement fines, because currently we have, and the police have, jurisdiction to issue bylaw charges.
The mover is amenable to that change of wording. Enhanced collection of bylaw. Could you please repeat it, Mr. Kratolik?
Suggestion would be that the government of Ontario investigate the enhanced collection of bylaw offenses.
Thank you. Any other comments from committee? I have a few questions from the chair. So when I went to Western, not as long ago as Councillor Squire, or probably the mayor, homecoming was closer to where it is now. And homecoming, when I was a student, was more for the alumni and not for the students. And we had a parade and we had a football game. So how long has this Roughdale specifically party been an issue in London?
Through the chair, I've been in this position for almost 20 years, and it was before my time. In my previous position in the city planning department, I recall my predecessor working with the community to address the same issue, however, not at the same magnitude.
Wow, I'm older than I thought. The Fleming Street riots, I do remember when those happened, and I wonder if there were academic repercussions as a result of that situation. What were there repercussions for Fanshawe students that were caught doing stuff at that time?
Yes, we were advised by Fanshawe administration that there were repercussions for the most heinous acts.
And can you give me an update on Lansing, Michigan, and how, if they've made any headway in containing their situation there?
Yes, we've been talking to municipalities across North America that have universities and colleges, and obviously the state laws are a little different. The one thing is getting identification of those that you're dealing with. Those going to these events in Ontario largely are not carrying identification, and that has became a key issue in last Friday's summit talks, because if that person ends up in the back of an ambulance, nobody really knows who that person is. So different states have different legislation. One of the issues is who is it you're dealing with? So when we ask somebody, what is your name? I don't have to give you my name. I'm not under arrest, so I don't have to provide your name. So Michigan State does a very good job in crowd control, specific to the football games, is what we learned.
So my last question, and I know you're not a London police officer, but is there a means, do they have the ability to stop the gathering from taking place in the first place? This is what I've always wondered as long as this has been going on. Can they not block access to the street unless you prove that you're actually a resident on that street?
I'll provide some commentary, and perhaps Dave can provide some commentary on emergency management. This street is quite unique because it's a cul-de-sac of 52 homes, and I believe 2 are owner-occupied, so it's a largely tenanted area. There's 2 access points, one from Richmond Street, one from Audrey, and there's laneways throughout the area, so public laneways. And the public has the right, I have the right to walk down that street and go visit my friend. The fact is that in 2018, enforcement was strong in the morning, but it just got so much in terms of the volume of people that the focus switched from enforcement to crowd control and public safety to try to get everybody moving along and outside of the area so that we can allow for EMS to come and remove those people that require medical assistance. Not sure if Mr. O'Brien wants to add anything.
Certainly through the chair. The only thing I'd add is if it's not on Broughdale, it'll be on Huron, or it'll be on Audrey, or it'll be on another adjacent street, because they'll simply move there.
Thank you. So I just want to point out, Mr. Katolik very ably pointed out that he and his staff are one cog in the wheel of trying to fix this. I want to point out that our staff are not riot police, and they're not SWAT. We could hire 100 more bylaw enforcement officers. This is a very potentially dangerous situation for them as well, not just for people doing stupid things. I'm glad to see all the players coming together. I'm glad to see Ms. Massey here, and I know you're new to this. I just want to comment that I think it's taken Western too long as an institution. It's taken Western too long to come to this place. But I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad that people are coming together and trying to prevent a real tragedy from happening. Speaking of the consequences, I'm glad you brought that up as well, Mr. Katolik. I'm glad that that Councillor Lewis has made the motion that he has. I know somebody that attended a party many years ago at Michigan State University. Great big huge party. It was while that person that I know was there, it was pretty calm and contained. But walking down the street with a beer did get you a fine. It did. And I think it goes to that whole broken window theory. If you stop the person walking down the street with a beer illegally, then that person is not going to keep drinking that beer and end up jumping off a roof. It was something like a $50 fine. It was a simple fine, but you had to go back. So somebody visiting there from Ontario had to go back and attend court to pay that fine. It wasn't a simple ticket and an easy thing to do. So even if that were one of the repercussions, that person has to go to and attend court, pay their $50 fine, and there were there was an agreement between Michigan and Ontario with that kind of an offense as well, so that if you were stopped by OPP speeding, they could see that and do something about it in Ontario. So I think we need to really examine all options, and it's great that we're looking at what other cities and educational institutions are doing, and we just have to keep trying, because I share the mayor's real concern that it won't be a broken neck or whatever broken bone that person had jumping off the roof. It's going to be a death. So thank you for coming out. Thank you for this report. And if I don't have any other comments or questions, then I think we have a motion on the table, and I think it will include receiving the report. Sure. And then we can vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
So we have the deferred matters list, and look to committee to see if there are any comments or questions about that. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate everyone's patience. I'll be really brief. The only item that I wanted to address was item number 1. And I know that neither Mr. Fleming or Mr. Stafford are here. I was going to inquire as to whether or not a report could be received back by the end of the first quarter of this year, simply because the anniversary of the Battle of Vimy Ridge will be coming up on April 9th, and we are still in a situation where we have a park with only a temporary designation. Since there are not appropriate members of staff here to respond to that, I don't know if through you I could ask the clerk to communicate that along, that if the process could be sped up and a report back to us as soon as possible on item number 1.
The clerk has indicated that, yes, she can get that answer for you, Councillor Lewis. So with that, I'll need a mover to receive that deferred matters list. Councillor Pelosa is moving it, and seconded by Councillor Hillier. Yep. Sorry.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
And there's one final added item, and it is the second report of the Animal Welfare Advisory Committee. There do not appear to be any action items on that report, so I will look for receipt. Moved by Councillor Sali, seconded by Councillor Hillier, and we can vote on that.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
And I'll look for a motion to adjourn, and we can do it manually. Moved by Councillor Pelosa, seconded by Councillor Hillier. All those in favor? Any opposed? Councillor Sali? Motion carries. We are adjourned.